President Akufo-Addo has released the list of deputy ministers appointed to his government for his second term, with a significant number of them being drawn from the party's MPs in Parliament. The list of 40 released Wednesday includes a Minister of State at the Finance Ministry and brings to 86 the Ministers of State, deputies and regional ministers appointed to serve in the administration. 57 of the 86 are currently sitting members of Parliament, compared to the President's first term, where 68 of his 126 ministers were MPs. We have details in the following graphics. So 86 ministers, including deputy ministers and regional ministers, appointed. That's in the second term. Of the 39 deputy ministers appointed so far, 34 are sitting MPs. Now, for 2017, the first term, ministers, there were 126 ministers, including deputy ministers and regional ministers, that were appointed. Of the 66 deputies, including deputy regional ministers, 38 were sitting members of Parliament at the time. And then for the second term of the 43 substantive ministers, sector ministers and regional ministers, 23 are sitting MPs. Now, total MPs who are now substantive ministers, sector or regional or deputies, are 57. And then for the first term, that compares with the first term, where of the 60 substantive ministers, sector ministers and regional ministers, 30 were sitting members of Parliament at the time. Total MPs who served as ministers, sector and regional or deputies was 68. And then again, looking at the second term, 86 ministers, including deputies and regional ministers. 16 are females, 70 are males. 126 ministers for the first term, 20 were female, 106 were males. Now, head of our political desk, Evans Mensah, joins us on Zoom for some more analysis on this. So, Evans, obviously, some persons like the former Deputy Information Minister Pius Agyedah was not included in the list. What's your assessment of the names we have?
I mean, it's instructive you mentioned the former Deputy Information Minister, Pius Agyedah. He is not alone, because this, for me, is a complete clear-out of the deputy ministers who formed Akufo-Addo's first government. I mean, you can count 39 deputy ministers, the nominations that we have. Out of that list, I count 31 new faces, which means that only 8 are from the previous term. So that gives you a sense of what the president is trying to do here. And to put it in context, this is a president who had a whole 4 years, and this is pretty historic in terms of the post-Republican democratic dispensation. We've not had a situation before where government, the president, appoints list of ministers and runs with them for an entire term. But that's what Nana Addo did. There was some reshuffle at some point, but that was so minute and minor in terms of the bigger scheme of things. And then he's taken advantage of his second term now to do that reshuffle we didn't see in his first term. And that's no surprise that the entire list of deputy ministers have been made away with, and a new crop of deputy ministers have come in. So you talk about, let's talk about the new face, the old faces, very few of them. So at the Energy Ministry, you have a few of them who are being maintained. I mean, Adam William Oreku was there. If you go to Employment Ministry, you have the likes of Bright Odubobe was there, has been maintained. You go to the Information Ministry, they've moved, for example, Nana Doku-Esiama from Information Ministry to Trade, and so she still maintains the position in government. But overall, the bigger theme you get there is that the president simply wants fresh faces, and that's what he's done.
All right, so you look at the list again, and you see that a significant number of them are members of Parliament. Now, you compare that with the first, the list of ministers that came out, and it appears the president is going out to say, if you didn't pull your weight enough to ensure that you won your seat, I'm getting you out of the system. Is that correct?
There's also a constitutional imperative, is there not? Because the Constitution says you have to appoint majority of the ministers from Parliament. So from the onset, the president's hand is tied in terms of the choice he has to make. I mean, but the bigger conversation has been around the lessons from his first term, because there are people like James Abos and others who believe that the fact that the president appointed first a huge government of more than 220 ministers, significant number of them, came from Parliament, first-timers who came to Parliament, and that contributed to the defeat, to the huge losses they suffered in Parliament when it comes to the seat, because a lot of these ministers were divided in terms of their attention for constituency work and doing government work. And so he was admonishing that this time, just barely meet the constitutional requirement. And so you select a bit more people from outside Parliament. But if you put it in percentage terms, he's doing now 69% of the people that he's appointed are from Parliament. And so that's still quite high. If you compare it to his first term, he was doing 53%. But then again, the actual numbers were higher then. But that tells you a story. But the challenge you face then, having appointed, in actual numbers, as we've seen, 57 people for Parliament overall, is that these individuals, with the way Parliament is currently constituted, will be needed in the House in times where you need them to vote on issues. Because if you miss out, the NDC will carry the day on a very important, public policy or government business, for example. And if you have so many of these individuals who are ministers and also members of Parliament, they may be caught up doing government work and may not be in the House to vote. That's going to be a challenge, to always whip them to get them in to vote and combining their work with parliamentary work. But then also there's a flip side to it. One of the biggest factors accounting for why it's taking this long for the president to nominate his deputy ministers, and by the way, 4 months, almost 4 months is taking for him to pull this off. Longest wait we've had in the Fourth Republic. One of the reasons that has happened is because the fear is that, if you appoint people too early and people get disappointed in Parliament, you are going to have an issue with people who are disgruntled because they didn't get any nomination, who then will not be committed enough to stay in the House and vote on issues for you, especially in the last 3 months when Parliament has sat for the first time. And that flip side is that now that he's had all these members from Parliament, maybe he's satisfied a bit more of those people. And so maybe going forward, he will have some stability and have their support and others to push through government business. So this is a fine balancing act that he needs to walk.
All right. Thank you very much, Evans Mensah. Evans Mensah is head of politics desk here at Joy News.